the post-game show, but nobody's excited to be here, including ourselves. So let's do this and get it over with. Andrew, I couldn't help but be reminded of the children's book Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. And look, I thought we reached rock bottom last week against the Vikings. Turns out that rock bottom is quite the valley because the Bengals are still there. They lose 28-3 on Monday Night Football to the Denver Broncos. And like I said, this was not a pretty game, Andrew, was it?
Not at all. And to me, I don't know about you, Craig, but it almost feels worse than last week because last week it felt like everything went wrong that could have gone wrong. And, if you fix some of those things, you turn the ball over 5 times in a game. Like, you ask anybody, oh, we turned the ball over 5 times, we're going to lose as bad as the Bengals did last week. But when you don't turn the ball over and you put up 3 points, 3 points with Jamar Chase and Tee Higgins running routes out there, that's pretty hard to swallow, especially how they looked on the opening drive. So yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we talked ourselves into last week saying, well, the game just got away from you. It was close until the turnovers. And those are things that aren't going to happen every week. And they didn't happen every week. But guess what? This offense is still not very good. Whether it's Jake Browning, whether it's Zach Taylor, whether it's Dan Pitcher, whether it's the offensive line, throw blame wherever you want to throw it. Quite frankly, right now it just feels like across the board nobody is performing at a level that they're going to need in order to be competitive in the NFL right now. Um, Chase Brown dropped a pass. Jake Browning obviously he's just not to the level of Joe Burrow. There's not much more to say there. Zach Taylor in the play calling, we have gone on and on for years about that. So no point in going back down that route. But it just, across the board at this point, not very good. And then you look at the defensive side and, you got lots of missed tackles. We talked about it at the halftime about poor routes from Fig Newton and just up and down, lots of unfortunate plays and things that just were sloppy and were a poor reflection of this team and what they want to be. And when you end the game with 11 penalties for 65 yards and only 9 touchdowns or 9 first downs, wow, 9 touchdowns would be crazy, Andrew. 9 first downs, you finish with less first downs than you do penalties. It's just not very good. You finish the first half with 94 total yards and 80 penalty yards at that point. Just overall, just a really, really poor showing. And we'll talk about what comes next. But first, let's chat about how we got to 28-3. I did a little bit of a breakdown in the halftime of how we got through there the first half, but we'll give a reminder in case you didn't see it. The Bengals took the ball first, and Browning connected with Tee Higgins on a 3rd and 6 for a 19-yard completion and a first down, but the Bengals were forced to settle for a 26-yard field goal on 4th and 2. Chase Brown on the drive, 3 carries for 12 yards, and the Bengals led 3-0. And for the first time all season, the Bengals defense stepped up and didn't allow a touchdown on the opponent's opening drive. Broncos go 3 and out. But the Bengals were unable to take advantage. They had a 4th and 2, were lined up to go for it, appeared to draw the defense off sides, but unfortunately a false start was called against Ted Karras. Ryan Ricow with a shank of a punt for just 24 yards. Broncos took over at their own 36. A couple plays later, Bo Nix scrambles for 6 yards and a touchdown. Broncos led 7-3 and didn't look back from there. Bengals ensuing drive. They had a 36-yard completion to Tee Higgins called back for an illegal formation on Amarius Mims. They immediately followed by a false start by Dylan Fairchild. Also got a delay of game on the drive. Ended up punting it away. The Broncos, well, Cam Taylor-Britt missed a tackle and Cortland Sutton ran for 22 yards. And then Marvin Mims, he took a end around and a terrible angle by Fig Newton allowed Mims to find the end zone, 16-yard touchdown. Broncos lead 14-3. On the Broncos' next drive, on 4th and 1 at the Cincinnati 2, Denver decided to go for it. Nix picked off by Demetrius Knight Jr. in the end zone in what felt like it could have been a turning point, but unfortunately the Bengals yet again unable to take advantage. 3 and out for the Bengals offense, give the Broncos the ball back with just over a minute to go. And they get a 28-yard completion on 3rd and 10 to Marvin Mims. Cortland Sutton then found in the back of the end zone for a 20-yard touchdown catch. And the Broncos went into half with a 21-3 lead. Thrilling, absolutely thrilling start to the second half. Broncos punt, Bengals punt, Broncos punt, Bengals punt, Broncos punt, Bengals punt. Broncos get the ball back, and they take a methodical drive. 10 plays, 76 yards, 6 minutes and 11 seconds off the clock, including 8 rushes for 52 yards. Bo Nix finds a wide open RJ Harvey for a 12-yard touchdown pass, and the backbreaker 28-3 is your final. The Broncos 37 straight game stretch without a 100-yard rusher broken. J.K. Dobbins breaks that number for the first time in 37 games. He finishes the day with 16 carries for 101 yards. The Broncos rushing attack 38 carries, 186 total yards, just under 5 yards per carry. Bo Nix on the day, 29 of 42, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the 1 interceptions. The Bengals offense failed to reach Denver territory after the first drive of the game in what was a terrible offensive showing. And let's get to that now, Andrew. This was, quite frankly, an embarrassment. You talk about that first drive and you get a little bit of excitement going, and then literally the rest of the game, nothing. They absolutely nothing. They start the game with a drive 62 yards for a field goal. They end the game after all is said and done. Remember, 62 yards on the opening drive. They end the game with 159 yards. Bengals able to get less than 100 yards after their opening drive, the remainder of the game. I don't even know where to start, Andrew, with the offensive struggles here. I'll let you just give me what you think. Where do we start?
Um, Tonight, this isn't a tonight thing. This is a season thing. Since Joe Burrow's been around thing, but obviously offensive line. I don't even know what to say about it at this point. It's terrible. They threw Rivers out there tonight. I'm interested to see how he grades out tomorrow. And Craig, you're gonna have to text me when you see Amarius Mims grade come out, because if that thing is above 30, we might have to throw out everything that PFF gives us going forward, because he was abysmal, and so was everybody. Nobody gets a free pass on the O-line. Obviously, Jake Browning is not Joe Burrow. You think you don't need him to be Joe Burrow until Joe Burrow gets back, and he's just not going to make the same types of throws with the same amount of accuracy. That's just the bottom line. He's not going to be able to extend plays the same way that Joe Burrow does. And we knew that. So you knew that you'd have to get creative with play calling. You'd have to be really good in the quick passing game. You thought that you would have to run the ball a lot better. And all these things that I'm listing are things that you can cross off that the Bengals did not do tonight. I mean, they just did not follow a winning game plan tonight, except for that very first drive. And then from that point forward, it was just a complete crapshoot on offense. There was no sort of rhythm. There was no sort of anything at all. They never got any momentum going. They never ran the ball well. Brown averaged 4 yards a carry on 10 carries, but that doesn't matter. 10 carries, it doesn't matter. So it was just really frustrating. And as frustrating as it was to watch the defense play, it's more frustrating watching the offense and knowing what they're capable of. And you can say that Jake Browning's out there. We saw this team with Jake Browning out there in the past, and they scored more than 3 points and had more than 150 yards. So you can't tell me that they're not capable of that. So it's almost more frustrating. It is more frustrating to watch the offense do what they do than the defense, because my expectations are different for those two groups.
Yeah, that's a good point. I thinking back to the game, and obviously we watched the whole thing. Reed did his play along. I don't know that I can tell you what the Bengals game plan was coming into tonight. And you can say what you want about the game becoming 21-3, but even in the first drive and beyond, I don't know really what the Bengals game plan was to try and attack this Denver defense. And I talked about it. I talked about it in the pregame show about how Denver likes to hit the quick passes and the early slants and the screen passes. And the Bengals defense didn't really seem ready for that either. There were broken tackles and bad routes and allowing players to pick up extra yardage that shouldn't have been available. And it just, screams of lack of preparation, lack of an understanding of your identity. And for a team who, we talk about it with the Reds all the time, right? And I put out a tweet about a quote from someone the other day about how the Reds insist on this identity that they don't even like take into consideration when creating their game plan. And it just feels like the Bengals are the exact same way. Like I legitimately, with Joe Burrow down, do not know what this Bengals identity is now, because you can't rely on Jake Browning. You can't rely on the running game. Jake Browning tonight, 14 of 25, 125 total yards. I mean, I I don't know where you go, and I don't know what the plan is. And you look at, we'll talk about it in a minute. You look at next week and you face the Detroit Lions at home. Well, you're going to have to get into a shootout with them, and this offense certainly doesn't seem capable of doing that. And I don't know what the answer is. You talk about the offensive line, you talk about the lack of a running game, you talk about Jake Browning. Like, it just, there are so many holes at this point with this team. A team that we had so much confidence in coming into the season. I can't help but just turn to the coaching staff. And I'm not one that typically likes to immediately try to jump on a coaching staff. The players have to go out there and execute and all of that. But this team's inability to adjust to Jake Browning, this coaching staff's inability to really protect Joe Burrow year after year, I'm at a point where I'm really starting to question things. And whether that's Dan Pitcher, whether that's Zach Taylor, whether that's positional coaches, I don't know, but accountability has to happen, Andrew. Where do you start with it? If you're Duke Tobin, if you're, you know, Mike Brown, where do you start with accountability at this point?
Well, we've seen different coordinators in the Zach Taylor tenure. We've seen different position coaches. And at a certain point in time, it's not those guys. It's just not. And I like Zach Taylor. I think he's a good dude. I think he's a good coach. But if things don't turn around quickly, and I'm not going to say that it's going to be during the season, it might not even be at the end of this season, but his time is going to be running out, and it's kind of seeming that way right now. I'm not sure how many more times you can fire an offensive line coach, or you can change things up in your defensive positional coaches before you start to just look at the head coach and say, hey, man, it's not good enough, because it simply hasn't been now since the 2022 run. I think they made the AFC Championship game that year, and that was the last time that they really had any sort of sustained success, if I'm correct. So we're going on year 3 now of disappointment in Cincinnati. And that's something that's going to be really tough for ownership to swallow, for management to swallow, when you have Jamar, T, Joe. I mean, those 3 guys they're everything to the organization. They're everything to the city. And if you can't get it done with those 3 guys, how else are you going to be able to do it?
It's really tough, because I think that Joe Burrow likes Zach Taylor. I do. And obviously Dan Pitcher was Joe Burrow's QB coach. Now he's the offensive coordinator. And I think Joe probably likes them both. And for better or for worse, I legitimately do think that Joe has Mike Brown and Katie Blackburn and Duke Tobin's ear, and he gets what he wants. Now,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, sometimes that's selfish desires from Joe Burrow, right? I mean, he got his wide receivers. Yes, he pined for Trey Hendrickson in the media as well, but obviously the priorities were Trey and T, and those deals got done. They signed Mike Gesicki as well. So Joe gets what he wants, and the problem right now is I think Joe likes the coaching staff, but ultimately if the job's not getting done, it's got to start somewhere, right? And certainly it makes sense that last year Joe thought his team was good enough to make the playoffs with the offense that they had, but the defense didn't step up. And so Joe may have pushed for Lou's ousting. I don't know that, right? I don't. But ultimately, the accountability had to be held somewhere. And it certainly wasn't going to be held anywhere on the offense after Joe's performance. Um, and so now you turn to 2025, and again, Joe is out. So how much of it can you blame on the coaching staff? And you and I can sit here and put a lot of blame on them, but I don't know what the answer is. And a lot of people during our live broadcast are calling for the Bengals to make a trade for a quarterback. If you're in the shoes of Duke Tobin or Zach Taylor, are you calling for Jameis Winston? Are you calling for Russell Wilson? Do either of those names or anybody else make an impact on this team at this point, Andrew?
2 weeks ago, if you asked me that, I'd probably say no. After watching the performance for the last 2 weeks, and it's hard to put this all on Jake Browning. But why not? I mean, what do you have to lose, really? A 7th-round pick, maybe? Like, what are you really giving up for the third quarterback in the Giants system who doesn't even dress? Like seriously, what do you have to lose? You might as well take a shot at some point, and if things don't get better, especially by next week, and next week is going to be as tough a test as this game was. I mean, Detroit is a serious contender. So, and I do want to push back on one thing a little bit, just because I think Joe Burrow, you mentioned that it might be selfish, and I don't know if it's, and this might just be me looking at him as Cincinnati's golden boy at the same time. But I don't know if it's selfish for him to want those receivers. I really think that he thinks that's the best way to win games, or that they could win games, because that's what they've done. And I'm not sure if it's selfish or if it's more so just his opinion that's best, if that makes sense. And I still
Well, here's what I'll
think
say
that,
about that real quick. I think it's the
yeah,
quickest route to success. I don't know
right.
that it's necessarily set up for long-term success because, again, you're talking about a one-year deal with Trey Hendrickson. The Bengals have shown no real indication that Trey Hendrickson will be here beyond this year. Certainly, there's the opportunity that they could franchise tag him, and maybe that was part of the conversation with Trey when they signed him to a one-year contract. Is, hey, you're getting a 1 year guaranteed with a second year option for a guaranteed 36 million or whatever that number comes in to be.
Mhm.
But the truth of the matter is that there has to be an investment somewhere on that defensive side of the ball if Joe wants to have an opportunity for success. I mean, whether Joe is in the lineup or not, we saw last year the amount of times that Joe Burrow put up phenomenal offensive numbers, and the defense wasn't able to hold the opponent to low enough output to be able to keep that win. So yeah, I get it. Maybe it's not selfish. Maybe it's just Joe thinks that that's the best way to win right now. But I, there has to be a conversation at some point about what's best for the franchise and what's most sustainable. You've invested now in your quarterback and your two main wide receivers along, you've invested draft picks on the offensive line. You've what's next? Like, how do you
Right.
go? What's the next step? Because you have
Yeah.
$10 million in cap space right now. So, obviously you potentially could free some of that up if Trey signs elsewhere next year. But again, if you use the franchise tag on him, you're left with basically 5 million in cap space for next year. So how do you take the next step?
Yeah. Well, I agree that I don't personally, I guess I should say that there's two ways that I see teams creating championships or building championship rosters. We look at the Kansas City Chiefs, who invest heavily in their defense, and then they have their all-star quarterback, right? And they're not necessarily paying a lot of guys on that offense that are skill position players. You have Pacheco, you have Kelsey, Tyquan Thornton, and Juju Smith-Schuster are out there running routes right now for the Kansas City Chiefs, right? So that's the one way that I'm seeing. That's not what the Bengals did. The other way is what the Eagles are doing, where they pay some of those skilled players on the offensive side of the ball. But what are they doing that we're not doing? They're drafting and hitting on their draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. And they are much better at that than we are. And I think that is really where we're lacking, is we're not getting the production from the draft picks. Miles Murphy, and I'm, Dax Hill has his injury concerns, and, the jury's still out on him, but it's been a few years now. How much longer do we give him? But there's so many of these guys, Cam Taylor-Britt, where you're spending top 3 round picks and none of them are hitting, at a certain point in time, that becomes the problem to me.
Well, that's Duke Tobin, right? So
Yeah.
Duke Tobin and the scouting staff is, again, we talked about accountability. You're not going to fire a scouting department mid-year. You're not going to fire Duke Tobin mid-year without some sort of accountability on the coaching staff, right? So Duke Tobin is beyond comfortable on this franchise right now. He's been with them for 20 something years. I don't think he's going anywhere. And so we talk about Zach Taylor potentially being on the hot seat coming into this year or being on the hot seat this year. Again, same thing. They let Marvin Lewis hang around for 16, 17 years. Like, I don't know that anybody on this staff, anybody in this front office has ever or really should feel heat underneath their seat right now, because I don't know that that's the Bengals MO. Like, prove me wrong, I guess would be what I would say to you. Yeah, they fired Lou Anarumo last year, but again, it was one of those things where it was so blatantly obvious that Lou Anarumo's defense was going to be blamed for the lack of playoff appearance last year. This year, you can point to so many things already about why the Bengals are not going to make the playoffs. And so to sit here and act like, oh, well, Duke Tobin's to be accountable in the scouting staff or whatever, like, yeah, sure, but that's not going to change right now. And I maybe accountability changes nothing, and maybe the Bengals lose the next, you know, maybe they lose the next 13 games and finish the year 2-15. But something has to change if you want to try and at least salvage something of this season so far, right? You fall to 2-2 today, which, as crazy as it is still within reach of the division, because the only team ahead of you right now is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Baltimore Ravens are sitting behind you at 1-3. It's still in your control if you want to try and win this division and make the playoffs. As crazy as that sounds after the last 2 games and how bad they've looked, it's still within realm to potentially compete for the playoffs if you think that you have a chance, right? I,
Yeah,
but
this is
if
the
you sit there and do nothing, nothing's going to change.
Yeah, and that's one of the other really frustrating parts about this is that the AFC, specifically the AFC North, seems like it's wide open this year with Kansas City at 2-2. Baltimore is 1-3, obviously. If I was sitting here with Joe Burrow on my team, I wouldn't feel threatened by the Aaron Rodgers Pittsburgh Steelers that much. And so from that vantage point, it's almost more frustrating because that the bar to get in this season is a little bit lower maybe than years past, where you knew that you were going to have to go beat Baltimore twice or whatever it is, and we couldn't seem to do that. We couldn't even beat them once. So, yeah, that is that's even harder. Is a harder pill to swallow, knowing that if things were a little bit different right now, that the Bengals would be in a great spot to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I how confident are you that this front office or coaching staff actually has any level of faith in this team to make the playoffs in order to actually go out and make some of those moves that we're talking about?
And this team right now, I can't imagine. I know what Zach Taylor's going to say, right? Like we know what he's going to say in his press game after this, or post game after this, in his press conference. Like it's the same thing when they lose games like this. Where we got to regroup and watch the film and whatever. But how does he really feel? I have no idea. If I was him, I would be figuring out every way possible to try to get some more help to try, because he has to know, that there's people that are going to be questioning his ability to coach, and at a certain point in time, that's going to come in the form of a hot seat, right? So he has to know that, and so I think that he probably wants them to make some moves to try to get this team to be better. And from the front office perspective, I really don't know. That it's so unlike them to do anything in season.
Yeah, which doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence. And it's like, all right, we talked about coming into this year about Chase Brown being a difference maker, about him having a breakout season after last year having 1,400 total yards, and how there's an opportunity now for him to have a great year. How, this Bengals offense is set up for success with Joe Burrow and with the wide receivers under contract and with Mike Gesicki, and you add Noah Fant, and you go out and you sign Dalton Reisner, and you draft 2 offensive linemen and all of these things. Like, all for what? And then Joe goes down, which again, I'm not sitting here trying to blame Joe Burrow or for any of this, right? Like, it's not his fault that this organization is not set up to be able to succeed without him. But they can't run block. They can't pass block to give Jake Browning time. Jake Browning, as good as he may be as a backup quarterback in this league, can't get the job done or hasn't been able to get the job done. And so I don't know where you go. So I guess here's how I'll leave it is, I'm going to put you in, I guess, Mike Brown's seat after the last 2 weeks. Tell me what you do tomorrow, because I would have to start tomorrow morning. That would be the first things, right? So walk me through your plan.
Man, I think that I would probably make a call to New York, see what they got, see what you can do to possibly acquire one of their backup quarterbacks. Whether I'm assuming it would probably be Jameis Winston because that would cost less. But I would try to find something that is going to give this team a little bit more of a spark, and maybe even try to address the offensive line in some way. How that comes up, I really don't know. But there has to be some sort of changes made at this point in time, and it's just really tough to put your finger on one because there's just so much that has to be corrected in order for this thing to get going in the right direction for this season.
Yeah, I know. I think that's part of what makes it so difficult, right? Is like, there are so many things that have to be fixed in order to turn this season around that I don't know that this team will undertake it. This front office will
Right.
undertake it. And
Yeah, I agree.
I I I wish I could sit here with confidence and say, yeah, I think tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up, because I'm in the central time zone, to reports of the Bengals checking on Russell Wilson or checking on Jameis Winston or whatever it may be, right? But I just don't know if I have any faith in that happening, as much as that sucks. And I don't know. It just I wish I did. I wish I
Yeah.
did.
And the unfortunate thing is that I think that they're probably going to sit on their hands, do nothing, and hope that they get some luck or end up with a high draft pick or something like that.
I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat, including our own Casey McAllister, which surprises me, but a lot of people saying trade Tee Higgins. And maybe it's just because they think that that's the player that they can get a return for. But Tee Higgins just signed a 4-year contract, y'all. Like, he's not going anywhere. You don't sign a player to a 4-year contract in the offseason and turn around and trade him. Like, I don't understand the people that are saying, there's multiple people in the chat. It's not just Casey. I know I called him out because he was the last one I saw, but like, there were multiple people in the chat saying to trade Tee Higgins. Like, in no world will there be a single call about trading Tee Higgins. Not a single one. And I'm just putting it out there right now. If Tee Higgins gets traded before 2028, the end of 2028, which would basically put it before the last year of his contract, I kick me off a Chatterbox. kick me off of social media, do whatever you got to do, but like it's not happening. Um, it just a non-starter, not only just for me, but for the Bengals. We just talked about how much Joe Burrow has seemingly control on the front office, and now you think that we're gonna now you think we're gonna turn around and trade one of the Joe Burrow's guys. It just am I crazy in that, Andrew? That's not happening, right?
No, if he was on a 1-year contract, maybe, but the fact that they just signed him to this, I cannot see that happening. And the other thing is, there's not a lot of teams that can. What is he getting paid annually? Isn't it 28 or 30 million a year, something like that?
Yeah, it's a deal. It's a steal.
Yeah. So how many teams right now that are competing and contending have that space to take on, especially for the upcoming seasons, or really have a need? I guess there's a couple out there that come to mind, but it won't happen. And it's like you said, like it, your goal as the front office, well, half of your goal is to keep Joe Burrow happy, and that's a that would not do that. That'll be a anti Joe Burrow move.
Yeah. All right. We've commiserated enough, I think, and which is a crazy statement to say as we move forward in our rundown to talk about what's up next. And let me tell you how excited I am to tell you that what's up next is Cincinnati hosting the Detroit Lions and that potent offense. They come in with a running back duo of Sonic and Knuckles, Jameer Gibbs and David Montgomery, a passing attack with Jared Goff featuring Amon-Ra St. Brown, among others. Game 425, yet another national broadcast, this one on Fox. I'm sure many are thrilled that this is going to be one of the national broadcasts on Fox, but yet here we are. It is here we go again. It is Stripe the Jungle Week at Paul Brown Stadium, Paycor Stadium, I should say. Excuse me. So I haven't actually seen a diagram of what colors to wear based on which sections you are in, but I'm sure the Bengals will put that out soon. But Andrew, talk me off the ledge. I'm in for a 45-10 beat down here by the Detroit Lions. Am I crazy?
No, I wish I could provide some optimism here. But during the game, my buddy is a Lions fan. I texted him and I said I might take Lions minus 30 next week. The way that we looked and the way that their offense moves the rock, it's just going to be. And they don't let up off the gas by any means. It's not like their running game isn't explosive to begin with, but they're going to throw the ball into the fourth quarter even if they're up by 4 touchdowns. So the Bengals have their work cut out for them. Um, it's going to be a big test for them. And honestly, there's no such thing as moral victories in the NFL. But at this point in time, I would just like to see them play some resemblance of a good game.
Yeah, semblance is right. Like literally, just show me something at this point. Show me
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Because so far you've shown me very little in the last 2 weeks. And Dan Campbell shows no mercy. Not only is he going to run up the score, but he's not afraid to go for it on fourth down. And this Bengals defense better be ready to try and step up to the task because I'm worried. Because as much as we talk about the Detroit offense, the Detroit defense is really good as well. I am nervous to say the least. And yeah, we'll just have to see how things go. Because as of right now, coming into this week, the Detroit Lions are allowing just 293 total yards per game, only allowing 199 through the air, 94 on the ground, and allowing just 22 points per game. So we'll see how that goes, but Chatterbox Bengals will be with you when it happens. I don't know if Reed's going to be up for yet another epic night of Cincinnati Bengals watch along or not. We'll have to figure out exactly what the plan is for next week. But one way or another, we will have a Chatterbox Bengals for you next week, a live watch along starting at 4 o'clock with our pregame show, and then 4:25 we'll have our watch along. But before we even get there, Andrew, tomorrow night, if you want something to be excited about after tonight's game, it's time to turn the page because Tuesday night, the Cincinnati Reds make their return to the postseason. 9:08 first pitch. Chatterbox Reds will go live with a pregame show at 8:30 and then a live watch along for the entire game starting at 9:08 p.m. The game being broadcast on ESPN. For the Dodgers, it will be Blake Snell. Blake Snell, the last time he faced the Reds, you know what he did? He threw a no hitter. The Reds are going to be looking for payback. It happened in when Blake was with the San Francisco Giants. On the hill for the Reds, the ace Hunter Green, 7-4 on the year, 2.76 ERA. Nick Kirby and Trace Fowler will be live throughout the entire game for you. We look forward to hosting you and having you for that. Tuesday's game is at 9:08. Wednesday, game 2 of the series is also at 9:08. Announced tonight while we were live, Zach Littell will take the mound for game 2 against the Dodgers. He'll go up against Yoshinobu Yamamoto in game 2. And then game 3, if necessary, will be Andrew Abbott for the Cincinnati Reds going up against Shohei Ohtani. Game taking place at Dodger Stadium, and I know we are all excited for the Reds to be back in the postseason. Obviously, they had their COVID postseason appearance, but the last time that the Reds appeared in a full season postseason was 12 years ago, as Reed whispers in my ear that he's not excited for the Reds to be in the postseason, but we all know he is. Andrew, any final thoughts on this one or on the Reds game tomorrow night?
Let's hope it's more entertaining than this one.
If the Reds lose 28-3 tomorrow night, I promise you I am not coming on a post-game show with Nick Kirby here. I'm going to come in and just do the box score recap. I can promise you, Nick, if it is 28-3, your box score recap is going to be the Reds lost 28-3. But let's hope that doesn't happen. We hope to see you there tomorrow night right here on Chatterbox Sports YouTube. Make sure you follow us on social media. If you haven't already, please give a like. Reed was live for 4 hours tonight, taking you through this entire game. For Andrew Collinsworth, I appreciate you joining as well. Until next time, this has been Chatterbox Bengals. We look forward to seeing you next time and tomorrow night with Chatterbox Reds, all right here on Chatterbox YouTube. Until then, Hoo Day and go Reds.